Hey dudes, welcome back to another episode of our Rhomas Men's Team podcast. You are about to listen to one of our prior team meetings. If you ever want to join one of our live sessions that we have every Monday and Friday, head over to rhomas.com. That's RHOMAS.com and put your email in and we will send you a live link every time we record. We generally record on Mondays and Fridays. So if you ever want to be on the actual podcast, like we bring men up all the time to talk about their goals, talk about their obstacles, etc., head over to rhomas.com. And then also, if you want to help support the channel grow and also have access to exclusive content, book reviews, extra whiteboard sessions, etc., and some coaching sessions, head over to patreon.com and support us. We would love it. But if not, no biggie. We'll see you on the live sessions. Later, dudes. Enjoy this podcast. What's up, guys? Welcome back. Another episode of Rhomas Men's Team podcast. Mr. Matthew McCusker, what's up, brother?
Chilling, man. Chilling. I'm in the midst of
we got a heavy topic.
Yeah,
a heavy topic
today.
Today.
Personal crisis right now.
But I got to say, before we hop into that, this book, at some point, you and I got to get into this book. It's called, remember I was telling you The Law of Success, Napoleon Hill? Like, it's right up your alley, dude. You know, thick book, looks like a book that one of our founding fathers created.
Yeah, the book looks awesome.
Dude, well, just so you know, man, copy is on its way now. You should get it on Saturday.
What?
So, yeah, man.
Damn, dude.
Yeah.
I think now I'm like rethinking the book that I wrote. I want to actually now just redo the cover. I want to only do covers that look like that now. I think
it's amazing.
Cover illustration, I think, is kind of lame. That's what books are supposed to look like that.
Yeah. I mean, for the listeners who are not watching the video right now, it looks like almost like I don't know, some sort of like old dictionary or something that an attorney would have in his like wall full of like legal books.
I mean, dude, that's a pretty. And when was that book written?
It says 1925.
Pretty alpha move. If that book was in like 2020 and the guy released a cover like that, it's like, damn, that's an alpha fucking move.
Oh, dude,
this looks like Encyclopedia Britannica.
Honestly, so I have this at home. I read it. I'm going to reread it cover to cover soon, but I read it like a few passages from it, let's say a couple times a week. And it's just a game changer, man. It's just fundamental stuff. Like, for instance, one of the things is, what is it? Do more in use value than you receive in cash value. Mm-hmm. So meaning like go out there, and I personally call it my payback ratio. Like my payback ratio that I shoot for is 90-10. I want to be paid for 10% of the value that I deliver. So there's always an extreme imbalance, an extreme asymmetry. I don't care if that's in friendships, if it's in business, if it's in intimate relationships, doesn't matter what it is. If I have that mindset, I don't want it to be 50-50. Because if you're trying to get it exactly 50-50, like everything, half the stuff I do, I want to get paid for, or a lot of people try for, 100-0. Everything I do, I want to get paid for in return. I don't think that's healthy. I don't 50-50. For me, at least, I want to increase the game to the point where I want to produce so much value. Now, I want to be competent as a percentage, right? So that allows for my income or whatever, like my emotional receiving back. Doesn't have to necessarily be monetary. But like, I still want that to scale. So I don't want it to be a flat dollar amount, right? I want to, so that's why it's a percentage. So 90-10.
How do you, is that like a thing you keep loosely in your head, or do you actually try to measure that? Like, I know you're a metric man. So you just kind of make sure like, you're not doing, everything for nothing, but you're also not like, the whole fuck you pay me thing of like, I don't even budge unless you give me some sort of deposit thing. So you'll go and meet people, assess their situation, get to know them, and be like, here's what I can do.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. I think that is a good way to do it. And it's also a good check on yourself. Like, can you go do the thing you do for free ever? Or is the thought of doing the thing you do for free, like absolutely torturing, where you're like, no, like you must reward me. And if I am going to do this thing, I must be immediately rewarded. But that's a pretty fair point. Well, so this is the, and I think it's a good way to go. Here's the problem I have, and I think I have, and it's one thing too to have a problem. This is what I'm dealing with right now. You have a problem, and from an ego perspective, you want to attribute it to something else. You don't want to be like, this is where I went wrong. And I think I can almost precisely, and this is like really, to me, it's really interesting, and it goes kind of deep, but it's like, so there's the, you're doing a thing, say like I'm trying right now, I'm really trying to start up Psychnol, and it's like, I finally now have it. It was never properly conceptualized, meaning like I didn't
Yeah.
have an exact way I was going to do it. And now I do. Like I'm sticking to my guns on how I want to do it and like what the whole point of it is, like very specifically, where before it was like, you come up, the whole idea I was trying to do is like see how much a therapist is necessary and see what you can do to make it less necessary. And then the way you measure that is like pre and post tests of psychological flexibility. So it's like, if I have a group of people who are just given the information and they're able to practice it by themselves or with each other. So then you can be like, all right, so you measure that person pre psychological flexibility, the end of 6 weeks. How did that pan out? Did that actually produce a change that you can look at and measure? And then it's like, all right, so then you take people and it's like, it's actually led by a trained moderator. What difference does that make in terms of psychological flexibility? Like, did people actually gain certain skills? And, can you actually show that? So that was what I was set out to do. And then, you start getting these thoughts like, yeah, but like, it's kind of crazy to think that you might not need someone to be there. And that could present another thing. And this it almost boils down to like a weak sense of self. Like you have an idea and you're like, I want to test this, but you let external things be like, no, you can't do that. And then you have an idea and the external idea kind of overpowers that. You just you end up not like not doing it, but kind of slowing, moving in a way that you're not actually, like you were saying, moving the needle, which I like that phrase a lot. Like you're working on it, but you're not focused. So your work is just kind of scattered and dispersed and doesn't actually produce a thing, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So what happened is, I have a guy who's helping me with stuff, that was great. But this
is the chaos. This
is where the chaos starts. I've
right, so we got a
pinpointed this whole
chaos
thing
story. So
and
let's
follow.
go
This is funny because it's a funny thing is that, like, the way it actually manifests itself is so far away from the thing that I was actually doing and the things that I think I did wrong. This is the interesting thing. So as we're setting stuff up, he's taking extra initiative. He's doing things, doing that. Some of the initiative things he's doing in my head, I'm going, I don't know if we need to do that. But in reality, I just go, whatever, man, just do it. It's no big deal. I mean, in my head, I go, it's no big deal. But in reality, it's trying to not have a confrontation that I don't want to have. It just, to me is like where this thing comes from. So
I want to make sure I'm listening properly.
Yeah.
One of the things in a lot of relationship books is called active listening. And you probably learned a lot about this in psychology. So I want to be able to make sure I'm processing that. So guys, when you're listening to this, as corny as this sounds, if you're in a relationship with anybody, business relationship, intimate relationship, one of the major things, common themes that they talk about in these books is active listening. Am I hearing Matt right now am I picking up what he's putting down, right? Am I hearing what he's actually saying? So I think what you're saying is in your business, right? You've got an issue and you have an employee coming back and saying, I will handle this issue for you. Just give me the green light to do it. And you're initially hesitant to say, yes, go and handle it. But, because you're busy and all these and you want to give autonomy to employees, you say, yeah, go handle it. Am I with you so far?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's one of those things. And it also goes back to not having a clear and concise definition of what you're trying to build. So that's almost a next level of it. If it's like, I'm not going with my gut. I'm letting other things, influence my thinking on what I'm trying to build. So then it goes into like, so the thing's kind of unstable.
Yeah.
So then, and this is the other part of like, you're like, another person's like idea for what it should be starts bleeding into it. And you're unable to, since you don't have a clear vision yourself, to be like, no, that's not what I'm doing. So instead you go like, yeah, sure, let's do that too. And that'll be fine. So damn, that's sick. Your desk is rising right now.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but
I love that.
I'm getting engaged in this. So I'm ready. I'm on my toes now.
I'm telling you, this is a good one. It really is. And it's really crazy how it pans out. So yeah, so like things are going on and I'm doing other things. So I'm like, the thing's already now, this thing that I'm doing and trying to do is kind of away from me right now, because again, it's not contained in my own personal vision and my own personal, like the true sense of what I think it should be.
Yep.
So then like, how else? So, okay. So, so he, the responsibilities are starting to kind of expand, things kind of shifting from where I actually want it to be. And then, so, and this is a, unrelated thing with my personal comedy podcast. I see that there's people pirating stuff and all this stuff. And, it was like one of my good friends, he went on and complained about it like publicly on like the Reddit. He was like, yo, this is bullshit, blah, 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 blah. He does a podcast too. And people just started like attacking him, being like, fuck you, blah, 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 like just nasty, mean shit. So I'm sitting there, I go, in my head, it's like 11:30 at night. I email the guy who's like, helping me build my site. And I'm like, yo, was like, strike them down on YouTube. Like those guys who are doing this, if this is how they want to be, I was like, and again, it's like, this was more of the response to it, but I just lumped it all in one. I'm like, just strike them down, dude. Fuck those guys.
Right.
So then he does this, and I wake up to this flurry of like, I can't believe we're being censored, blah, 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 blah. All of this stuff goes on. And I'm like, oh man, I think I created a bit of a clusterfuck. So, so again, and it is tied together. I know this seems diffuse, but it does go back to the same thing where I'm sitting there. I honestly, I was taking a dump. The dude who I hired to do stuff for me, he was like, yo man, they're thinking this is because of that guy who originally put a post online who has a podcast. And I was like, well, that sucks. I don't want my actions to be a problem for someone else or even hide behind that. So I was like, I'll just address it. We're going to do a podcast in a day. I'll talk about it because I don't feel like addressing this on this forum, Reddit, that I right now have like a very complicated view on. So I'm like, I don't feel like typing and engaging a bunch of people who I think a faction of them are inherently negative no matter what. It's like, I don't want to feed into that kind of thing. So I'm like, I'll just talk about it on our podcast, dude. And God bless him. But he goes, hey, I'll just say I did it. And then I'll let them focus on me. And I was like, nah, man, I'll talk about this on my podcast. He's like, no, man, for real. Like, I'll do this. And we were like kind of laughing. I was like, whatever, man, whatever you want to do. And that's, again, the second time my head is going, don't do that. But I'm just going like, rather than being like, dude, no, like for real, stop, not happening. Being like, yeah, whatever, dude, do whatever you want. And that's, dude. So that little decision turns into this situation where he goes on, he's like, I did it. I'm the one who did it. They instantly figure out who he is. They like see his YouTube and dude, just start as mean as you can possibly imagine it. Just start being like, you're fucking there. Like just hitting him with, is like, imagine if someone pulled up anything they could find of you and a hive mind descended of being like, just trying to hit all your little insecure buttons. So they were successful. And this dude like freaked. And he told me like, they're doxing me, like putting out my public information online. And I was like, oh, dude, I'll make you a moderator. He was like, make me a moderator so I can ban people who are doxing me. I said, yeah, dude, whatever you want. I'm working on I'm like sitting there doing real work in my life. Yep. And I'm like, yeah, whatever you got to do. So apparently, this is so fucking funny. So he power tripped and started banning anyone who made fun of him and not people who were doxing him. So he started banning people. Then people were like, we're getting banned. And they're freaking out online. This is, an online forum. So again, this is the point. What I say is like a weak sense of self of like letting other things dictate how you move and think manifested into this total fucking, what could be described as a nightmare with now, like, people are like Matt McCusker and fucking all this shit, fair enough. Fine. This is the arena I live in. It's totally cool. Yeah. But it's like when you see how far it can get and that's just one thing. Imagine how far your life can get away from you. And if you have those blinders on when you go, and I could have been like, oh, these guys are just this, that, and this. And I did do that a little bit. I did make fun of them pretty badly. I feel kind of bad about that. But it's like, that's the ego blinders to be like, rather than looking at like where I personally went wrong and just kind of like let go of this whole thing, to be like, forget that. And you just double down on the fact that you kind of fucked up somewhere down the line, So that's what I'm dealing with now. And there's like so there's a bunch of dissent and people are, at the end of the day, you can be like, oh, it's just a forum. And I've said that too. Oh, it's just a forum. Who cares? But it's like, people do feel badly. Like there's people who are like the guy who had the channel originally, who was, pirating stuff. It's like, he's like, dude, I just, I just like your guys' stuff. I feel bad. So I talked to him one-on-one. He's a nice guy. I talked to the guy who kind of like the guy who was helping me, my assistant, who, had a very bad day of like everyone just dogpiling on him. So it's like right now I'm talking to just like individuals to make sure they're all right. It's like, dude, it's a crazy thing to wrangle, man. Trying to wrangle like hundreds, if not thousands of just people who are, in my opinion, are just like, finding solace through an online community, which I think could be a good thing. But if it's based on just like tearing other people apart to feel better, that's where I'm like, That's where I depart. But you're not in an arena where you can give people nuanced takes, because there's people who are just wanting to fucking pick it apart and be nasty about it. So but that all comes from, in my opinion, me not confronting very small confrontations. And it's like I'm dealing with hundreds of people just like trying to violently, being pretty nasty and attack me. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, I can deal with that. But to one-on-one be like, hey man, pump the brakes. For some reason I lack that. And it's like, that's something I'm working on.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah. Can we kind of unpack that together?
Yeah. So hopefully that makes sense. That's the situation I have at hand. And it's like, dude, I think it's good. It's good. And we can definitely unpack it. But what I'm about to say is like, it's things like this that it's like, I almost I'm like thankful for sometimes. I'm like, oh, cool. That's like that really exposed me to a type of a flaw in my thinking that I now have to work on, which is pretty sick.
Oh, well, I mean, that alone, that last little sentence alone, of that problems are really opportunities for you to fix little blemishes, whether it be in skill set or whatever. And then also there's just an element of I wish more people thought in terms of statistics, because at the end of the day, in my opinion, you don't want to beat yourself up for something, because at the end of the day, everything's probability related, right? If I do this thing, there's a certain percentage of probability. If it's 10%, whatever your level of acceptance of the negative thing happening, it's not necessarily that you're wrong if the negative thing happened. Where you could be wrong is if you chose to go with a certain level of probability that you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like there's a certain probability that this thing, that you let this employee handle this thing and it was fine,
Yep.
right? He could handle it. Where most leaders would, at least a lot of people would walk away and they'd say, oh, well, this thing went belly up, so therefore it was the wrong decision. It's like, no, it just may have landed on the wrong side of probability. If you make a decision based off of your comfort with that probability, that's the right decision, in my opinion, every time. Now, where you might be wrong is assessing the level of probability. And that's not necessarily going to be objective. It's somewhat subjective, but it adds a layer of objectivity to it.
No, that makes sense. No, it does. It just be like, there's going to be snags. There's a percentage of possibility there's going to be snags that get hit, and all this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually argue, what we were talking about earlier was that you have the curse of a leader, right? The curse of a leader is you have to deal with a whole bunch of shit, right? At the end of the day, and people look to you, and it's like you're the guy that they're going to hang. And it's like, if you look at the successful people in this world, the amount of times they have to lay on their sword is unbelievable, right? Like your life starts to come under scrutiny, and that originally comes from the team, right? People, as soon as you start leading more than one person, like more than yourself, you're automatically at some point going to have a dichotomy in what certain people believe your decisions should be versus what they were. And that's a hard pill to swallow. And now I'd actually argue that's like, hell, man, you got a hell of an opportunity on your hands. Just like you're saying, you now have an opportunity to lead. I mean, and for the listeners, Matt has tens of thousands of listeners, like legitimately following him and his partner Shane on their podcast, like legitimately engaged in their discussions. And that's a very large team, man. That is a very large team. And then when you get into nuances of human communication, because human communication can at times be so abstract, and we all didn't grow up in the same moral code. So you all of a sudden you overlap a whole bunch of individuals who don't have the same blueprint. And it's like, that's an opportunity for you to teach, in my opinion, some moral code. Like, hey guys, by the way, you probably shouldn't be mean to each other. As simple and as cheesy as that sounds. And like, here's a great situation where we can actually navigate that together, because current real life examples are always better than the examples that you get in like health class in sixth grade. You know what I mean? Like these super generic examples where they don't relate to anybody, and they say, don't do drugs, man. It's from some like corny white dude, it's just an example, right? Like, that doesn't relate. It's like, hey guys, we now have an actual example. And as painful as it's going to be, I'm going to call some people out, but I'm not doing it. And I think the intention matters. I'm not doing it out of an intent of hatred. I'm actually doing it out of an intent of respect and love for you guys. Like, as a leader, I'm just going to speak my opinion, and you guys should follow me for it, because I've thought this out. And a lot of you just right now are not thinking through it. You're just being mean. Like, let's just call it for what it is. You're just being mean.
Well, this is the other thing too. So then, you have a bunch of people. This is you want to add a little nuance to it. It's like, so then it's like, what's my next move? And it's like, am I acting in accord with how I actually think, or am I acting in like a slippery politician like way just to guard my financial interests? You know what I mean? So now I'm in a pickle where it's like, what do I actually think? So it's like, what do I actually think, and what I actually think, how much of that is made up to just try to protect my own ego versus how much of that is being dictated by things of like, it's almost like a middle ground. Like I could just like be like, oh no, like fuck them, whatever, they're losers. You could spin it to whatever, even though, like I said, to be honest, it's like, it genuinely does. I feel bad. Like, it affects me. If you're telling yourself like, oh, I don't care, but you're like kind of nervous, it's like, you're kind of lying to yourself. So it's like, to hit a balance between like, not just blindly being like, oh, I don't care, fuck that, doing like some sort of ego trick versus like, just calculating what's going on and be like, what can I say to come out on top of this? That's just like money wise, status wise, but what's like, how do I actually feel? And how do you actually put that, how do you combine all of those things? And it's like, I do think you should just be genuine and, just live your genuine life. But it's like, I have those thoughts kind of that will swirl and I'll gravitate towards one side, so it's pretty crazy, man. But I did think I figured out a thing to do, which will be pretty fun. So
What are you thinking? If you don't mind
we,
me
we
asking.
do a thing. No, we do a thing called the dog check-in, where
Okay.
we just like pull up. So we'll do a thing like we've done it on Zoom before. We now do it on Crowdcast for now, but it's like me and Shane will talk and you just it's like a form fills up and you just bring listeners in and they pop them up on video and you can just talk to the listeners and like chat them
That's
up.
cool.
And there's a bunch of other listeners like commenting and listening to this whole thing. So what I'm going to do is what I want to do is do one of these again, and it'll be a full trial. I'll have my co-host Shane will be the judge. It'll be kind of fun. He'll be able to judge, and I'll be put on trial. And people can come up and testify. So
I love it, man.
I think it'll be pretty fun. I think it'll be because right now there's just a bad vibe associated with the whole podcast in general, and that's my bad. I would say, part of that is my bad. So it's like, just fix it. At the end of the day, it's like, when you talk about value create, I just want a thing people can listen to and feel good, and I don't want it to turn into this like thing of like people being at odds. It just doesn't feel good, and it's not something I want to do.
No, dude, I completely agree. And yeah, it's up to you as the leader to readjust that holistic feeling for everybody, for sure. Yeah. But what I like about what you're saying is, and I struggled with this for a while. There's a book. I actually didn't read the book, and I tried reading it, and it just wasn't necessarily for me. But I do like the concept. It's called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink, I believe. Yeah. So I'll try hopping back on the book at some point, but I do like the idea of the book, and at least the way that it was kind of sold to me was, hey, all things are your fault. So it says extreme ownership, and that didn't sit well to me because I have too much of an analytical mind to take that on. It's like, no, not all things are my fault. Like I would never run from a problem ever. At least I'd like to think I wouldn't. But it like, if somebody knocks a lamp over in the corner of the room and I'm nowhere near that lamp, right? Not my fault, right? So there's a lot of examples like that where it's like, I didn't even touch this thing, obviously I'm just giving it a funny little example, but a lot of things can happen in communication like that, especially running a business. It can get very nitpicky. But then I talked to another person about this because I was like, look, I can't get on board with that method or that mentality. It sounds really good for sure, because then it gives you more power, right? It's like, if you think that everything is your fault, then you automatically think that you can change it to a certain degree. So just as much negative, there is positive. But I had a friend explain to me, and I agree with this now. He's like, keep in mind that fault is not ownership. It's just saying take ownership of things. Yeah. So, okay. And that's what I hear you saying. It's like, hey, I definitely had some contribution to this for sure. But regardless of whose fault it is, I'm going to take ownership from it from here. And we're going to adjust it. Like, I'm going to play a role in the solution. I was part of the problem. There's other things as part of the problem. I'm not hiding from that, but I need to own it now. And I really like that mentality versus what most people do. And it's natural, right? Like, we don't want to take ownership of things because like, hey man, I didn't break it. I don't want to clean it up. And like, what if it breaks even more? It's like, yeah, but that's not a leader. Like, that is one of the lines in the sand that makes you either a leader or a follower, for sure.
Yeah, and there's also like, when something happens, there's all, like you're saying, that is a simplistic idea, being like, it's everything's your fault. There's a mix of stuff that wasn't your fault. There's some stuff that kind of was your fault. And the natural tendency is to magnify the things that weren't your fault so that you don't have to see the things that you did. Yep. So like, usually like, yeah, but this person did that. And then reality, it's like, yeah, sure, people do the things they do, but like, what was the genesis? Because, I had a certain involvement with it. Like, what was the genesis in terms of how I related to it? And it was like, okay, yeah, like that, this could have been averted. Like, it actually could have been.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah. Well, and you have right now, what you have is even more of a curse of a leader, because you are not just leading a small team. Or like I told you a few weeks ago, you are literally leading the university that you and I went to for undergrad. You're leading you're leading a larger university than that. That's wild to think about.
It's crazy, dude. It's insane. And there's also people, and it's like any organization too, because any job I've ever been at, there are people who are there who just hate everything the whole time, no matter what.
Yep.
You have to keep that in mind, but also not try to assign that to people who might be making sense, but be like, oh, you're just bitter, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, they might actually have good points. But then there's some people who literally are just bitter and want to, like, every job you've ever been at, there's someone who's there who's like, this sucks. They don't know what they're doing. I can't believe they're doing this. And it's like, all right, man. Yeah, sure. Whatever you say. But it's like, there's people who are at that level. Like, I've dealt with it in the labor union where, like, you're working at a job and there's a guy who doesn't do anything all day, who sits there and goes, I can't believe they're actually, this is like the dumbest way to do that. And it's like,
Right.
like we're just picking up trash, dude. Like we're not here. Like, we're not like setting up what's going on. And, you're completely wasting your time unless you were to go to the boss and be like, I have an idea for how we could possibly do this. You know what I mean? So it's like one of those things.
Oh, 100%.
So, it's one of those things, like I can see that, but then, obviously people have, I might have blind spots that I don't see that I'm doing. People are like, oh dude, that's totally ridiculous. Why would you do that? So, it's one of those things to like filter through that and be open to it while also not letting somebody dictate against your better sense or better judgment.
Oh, completely agree, man. Well, what you are articulating is that archetype of the Joker. You see that the movie, was it Batman, The Dark Knight or something like that, where with Heath Ledger and the Joker. And there was a great line in there where, whatever Batman's butler, I forget his name,
Alfred?
says, yeah, Wilfred. Yeah. Yeah. He says, Batman or, whatever, what is this guy's name? Damn it. What's the actor's name? He's just a beast of an actor.
He played Batman?
Christian Bale.
Okay,
Yeah, Christian Bale. So he's trying to put on his analytical cap and like use all this software and everything to analyze, what's the Joker's mentality? Why is he doing all this? And then Wilfred comes in and says, you have to remember, boss, that some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what the Joker as an archetype is supposed to represent, is just chaos. Right. There is no, it's not even necessarily evil, because you can kind of like, evil you can define, but like the Joker just wants to cause chaos. And yes, I think there's a minority of people. I think it's a minority of people. It's not a majority. It's nowhere near the majority, but a minority of people that are just kind of so lost that they just get pleasure out of pointing the finger and burning everybody else's building down.
Yeah.
But then as a leader, and I think this is where our sports analogy really helps, as you and I were talking about a while ago, one thing as a leader, especially if you're leading a very large group, is if you think about it, is similar to like being a basketball coach. Let's just say, let's say a high school basketball coach. Well, you're gonna coach, let's just say, the freshman and JV and varsity levels, and you have to deal with those people at those different levels. You have to meet them where they're at. And the freshmen are going to have way more nitpicky situations because they're not indoctrinated into that school of thought yet, right? They're new. They don't really know how the game is played, and they definitely don't know how the team vibe works at that particular school, if that makes sense. But then, there's a certain amount of people you got to cut, right? Yeah. There's a certain amount of people that basketball is not for them, right? And almost better to let them go and play volleyball or football, whatever it is, and get them off the team. And that I have found that's a hard thing to do as a leader, saying, hey, this just isn't for you.
Yeah.
And also it's like, okay, well then how do you stay engaged as the leader, right? If you are a professional, let's say you were a professional basketball player and you're now coaching, well, anything less than your skill level or what you're used to is very difficult psychologically to engage in. So if you're a professional, basketball player and you're now coaching at even a high school level, that can be very mentally draining, because it's like, you guys should know this, or the freshmen, you guys should know this. Like, I shouldn't have to explain this to you every day. But taking yourself back to a level of like, oh no, I was a beginner too at one point.
Yeah.
Right. So I already got the people who shouldn't be off the team. Those are the people who are just burning buildings down. Get them the fuck off the team. Mm-hmm. Right. But then it's like, then you have to meet everybody where they're at their current skill level. And when we're talking about, obviously we're not talking about basketball teams. Like, that's a lot easier when you're working more in the abstract world of leading a team that's at different levels of communication ability. You got to meet them there. And that's difficult, man. That's difficult.
Yeah, it's hard. And well, dude, going back to the idea of like, you say like the archetypical Joker and all this stuff, and it's a lot of that of like the idea, I'm trying to think like, what would people, I think, naturally usually think in terms of their own benefit. And I think the idea of like wanting chaos to ensue, because I can identify with that. I remember just, especially being younger, and even when like, and not even to be like overtly political, because I don't have like real political thoughts on this, but I remember, this is just my reaction when Trump got elected. I remember being like, oh, shit might get really weird. And kind of reveling in that like that thing. And I think I remember just being like, this is crazy. Like, and being like, this is, I was doing stand up at the time. I'm like, I remember I was like reveling in that. And I think the thing in terms of being like, that whole idea of like wanting chaos to ensue. And I don't know if people even realize this, or if I'm even right, but I think what it is like, you're unhappy with your position in life. And if there was just this huge ball of chaos, you might in that chaos be able to shift your position.
Yep.
So like, you almost, rather than just actually trying to shift your position and like what's going on, you're like, no, I need the world to just like fall amok, and then I'd feel comfortable like, trying to, I personally think that's kind of where a lot of that stems from.
No, I agree. I think we all have experience with that. Like I used to love snow days when
Yeah.
I was back on the East Coast because
Yeah.
it's like I got this project due and it's like, starting to see the weather report, guys, like, I don't know, it's looking like a little cloudy, and I'm
Yep.
like, damn, this is,
Yeah.
this is going to be nice. Like no more, I get to take a little break from reality and
Yep.
then I can catch up real quick. And you're right. Like, and then I can increase my status in the class, like by getting a better grade,
Yeah.
so yeah, we all experience this at different levels. I think you're spot on.
I think that is what it is. And even just like I said, like, you get somebody who can do something at a high level. It's like, yeah, but can you teach this to other people? It's like, is this just so automatic that to try to even figure out how to tell someone how to do it, you're just like, I can't. Like, I can't even think about I can't even think about the basics because all of this has become so automatic to me. It's like,
Well, and that's what makes I think a lot of great leaders are great teachers. One actually a weird example, one of the best cases I've ever seen of this in my entire life was I watched the Michael Jackson documentary years ago, and I forget what the documentary was called. It was like something like The Last Tour or something like that. So here you have a guy who is arguably the best in his field ever. Right? Like if you talk about best performers in history, he's got to be. I think a lot of people would say he was number one.
mm-hmm.
Right, to be on top for that long. It's like no wonder he had so many mental issues. Like you would too, right? Like I would too, right? But it's just superior in his craft. And they were doing his final tour and he was going through, and I get, obviously you got to go through like rehearsals and all those things and where you're dancing. And this guy is the Michael Jordan of dancing. And they were going through their dress rehearsals and they had to stop, like, from what I remember, like every 20 seconds because the dancers behind him were not doing it properly. Right. And you would have thought, I would assume most people in his situation, right, like probably even Michael Jordan would say, like, actually, I know this for sure because I watched the Michael Jordan documentary as well. Michael Jordan would have turned around and said, like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, you either get this shit right now or get off the team. And by the way, I have enough power to get you off the team. Mm-hmm. Right. But Michael Jackson did a phenomenal job of just turning around. And dude, he corrected them, like, from what I remember, like 10 times straight on the same thing. But he started off the critique very soft, just saying, hey, here's how you do it. And could you do it this way? And on the 10th time, he did it the same way with just as much care and just as much love. He didn't get frustrated. And that to me is like, how is this guy doing it? Because he's dropping himself down many levels to the point of like their skill and then able to communicate without frustration. And that's a level of like Zen leadership that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
So how can we adopt that?
True. And that, obviously sidebar, Michael Jackson, pretty clearly was a pedophile. So that sucks, but fantastic teacher. Fantastic teacher.
Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. Like,
true. No, I agree. The man obviously was a pedophile, but I do think that is, and you can't, people want to try to say like, dude, I mean, think about, and this is, all right, this might not be the most popular opinion, but it's like how good he is at dancing that they're like, and everyone getting like, knocked off of their canceled, their things removed. The opinion's pretty unanimous that he was engaging in pedophilic acts, and like people still play his songs on the radio. So
yeah,
man was good.
You gotta be pretty good. You gotta be pretty good at your craft.
Him and the Catholic Church, the only two who can withstand such things. But but yeah, it is true, and I do like that of not throwing the baby out the bathwater and like, the dude, that was a thing that guy could do, man, and he was a performer, he could do that, and being able to stop and just kind of meet people where they're at is a skill, man. It is hard. It is hard.
Oh man, I got to give a shout out to my bodybuilding coach Ryan Benson for this because his ability to do it. Like I compete at the amateur level, but this guy is arguably the best bodybuilding coach in the country. Like his it's a very similar thing. Like if you talk to the bodybuilding world, like he's always in the discussion for men's physique bodybuilding competing. But this guy is an example of just loving his craft so much that he teaches at all levels. So like even down to my level, the questions that I have are so elementary and primitive that it's like when I ask him, I almost feel bad. Or like, for example, in my last competition, just the way it worked, I was like, hey, should I eat my Pop-Tarts? Because it sounds weird to a lot of people, but before you go up on stage, what you do is you pump up and then you eat Pop-Tarts or you eat like gummy bears or something with a lot of sugar. Mm-hmm. Pop-Tarts obviously have a little bit more fat as well, but anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. So
that's what you do before you compete? You just munch a Pop-Tart and go out there?
Yeah. So what you do, so
awesome.
Yeah. So you want to try to gain any advantage that you can, because when you are competing, like literally you're in front of hundreds of people and the judges are right there and you got spotlights on you and you have about 15 seconds to go out and do your individual pose and they're looking at you, right? And you do all these spins. And then when you're done, you got to sit there and like flex for like, sometimes 10 minutes. And I don't know if you ever try to flex for 10 minutes, like your whole body, dude, and you're cramping up. You've got no water in your system, like literally all of these crazy things. And then what they tell you is to go out and you stand next to each other, like they call out the top 5, and that's that's like your real competition. Like, so you stand next to each other and like they tell you to do these poses, and you're trying to beat each other out, like all these very interesting things. So what did you say?
No, I'm just, and this is a genuine, honest question. It might sound funny, but like, did you ever like fart while you're squeezing your after? If I just gave me like a bag of Haribo gummy bears and I donged them and went on stage and was squeezing my abdomen, I'd probably fart.
No, dude, the answer is no. I don't know but you've got like nothing. So one of the things.
Oh, okay, I got you. So you're like hungry as fuck while you're like physically hungry as shit while people are doing.
Oh, dude, it's hard to even walk upstairs.
What?
Because you start to see stars. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Holy shit, man.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Now, the competition day actually is not as bad as the 2 weeks leading up to that, because competition day, you start to carb up a little bit, like a tiny, tiny bit, but you don't want to have what's called spillover. So when you consume carbohydrates, your body retains water. So you've got 3-to-1 ratio. So 3 molecules of water to 1 molecule of carbohydrate. But then if you consume too many carbohydrates, number one, like you're gonna retain much more water. So that's why you can't drink any water. It's like literally sips. But then also you don't want spillover, which is to the point where you consume too much energy. So your glycogen is filled up in your muscles. The glycogen is just kind of the storage of energy in muscles. It's kind of like a you can think of it like a water running through a hose, how a hose kind of pumps up. So that's the thing about that is your muscle to glycogen, analogy. But then if you consume too much, right, you have spillover. So think of like the water and starting to leak out of the hose. So you start to, and then your body retains that. So your abs won't show as much. Anyway, all those like kind of details. The point is like you're trying to get very, very, very precise, right, on the way your body looks. So you're trying to gain any advantage possible. So for instance, like one of the things you do before you step on stage is you pump up, right? So no different than what you do if you go into the gym, you do a bench press, your chest pumps up, you do bicep curls, your biceps pump up. Now there's not a lot of room in the back behind the stage, and you literally have hundreds of guys back there. It looks ridiculous.
Dude, that sounds awesome.
Dude, I think every guy should go through it, because there's so many life lessons in it, and it forces you to your physical limits for sure. But then right before you step on stage, actually hours before, so you get there at like 7 a.m. right? And you don't, oftentimes you go on at, let's say 10 a.m. and then you have 2 shows. So you got the morning competition and you've got the evening competition. So anyway, before you go, you can pump up, and then you eat some Pop-Tarts. Like my coach has me eat Pop-Tarts. Some other guys eat gummy bears and Sour Patch Kids and so on. You're just trying to kind of replenish that glycogen, and then you get your veins popping. So if you've ever done extreme dieting and then you take a lot of carbs, your veins start to pop. So you're trying to get like any little edge possible. Fun fact, I try to like sneak my Bowflex weights in the back, and that's like a no-no. They only do, because if everybody did that, right, there'd be no room.
Yeah. So
like if you want to see like some like crazy stuff, bring your Bowflex adjustable weights in the mix of like 150 bodybuilders, right?
Like I can't have one of those.
Oh, dude, they like lose it, right? Like it very much feels like a prison.
Did you try to go do it like somewhere secretly? Were you like in the corner, like pumping them real quick? Fuck, man.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd cover up my weights, but then you're in the corner and you try to get, but there's no dividers, right? You're just in a big rectangular room. And it smells like BO and tanning lotion and spray tan,
Dude, that is fascinating. I never thought about like the backstage at one of those things.
Oh yeah. So the point was like, my coach, I'm so ridiculously neurotic that I would like be texting him like by the second. It's like, okay, what time should I take my pop time? And he's like, dude, 10 minutes before. I'm like, okay, well, exactly 10 minutes, or like is 8 minutes instead. I'm not kidding. Like literally.
What was he saying?
Well, that's the thing. He had a great way of not calling me an idiot, right? Like meeting me where I was. It's like, obviously I'm new at this, because most of his athletes have been like literally have done 100 shows, right? So they're just on it. So they don't ask him all these little nuanced questions. And this guy literally is famous in this community. So one answer he could have is like, dude, just shut up. I already gave you the answer.
Yeah.
Right. But he didn't do that. He met me where I was, and he gave me enough tough love, but wasn't mean about it. Just saying, hey man, just relax. Don't sweat it. I will tell you exactly what you need to do. Right. You don't need to freak out. That was like the Michael Jackson version of that example, where I've had other coaches who are supposed to be leaders and they just couldn't be bothered. And that takes me psychologically out of the game.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, so how can we, and especially you in this situation, come down and meet your team where they are at all different levels. And especially when you do this, your Zoom meeting or your crowdcast meeting, you're going to experience, in my opinion, for sure. I would not be surprised if you experience, there's going to be some freshman level communicators in there. And there's going to be some JV, there's going to be some varsity, there's going to be some pro. How can you deal with that? And that's to be a cool exercise for you. How can you deal with each of them, meeting them where they're at, and come out successfully? That'd be a cool exercise.
No, absolutely, man. It'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting thing to handle. And again, also handling it in a way that I feel good about. That's not, that's like not like an overtly trying to like a ploy or something inauthentic, but to try to authentically communicate yourself and be like, this is how I honestly feel about it. This is where I'm coming from. This is where I think I might have loused up. Here it is. It's not just this thing that kind of like to keep trying to detach and distance myself and be like, no, you guys suck. Fuck you guys. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, here's where I fucked up. My bad. I think there's some bullshit going on your guys' side, whatever. But it's like, it's fair is fair. And, that's what it is. So, but yeah, I agree. It'll be interesting. I'll be curious. It'll be funny. It'll be something we can actually follow, which will be interesting to see how it.
Have you ever tried stating your, like, especially in a relationship, an intimate relationship and friendships, during times of confrontation, stating your intention and your desired outcome, as clinical as that sounds? Have you ever tried that?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually do that. I do that with Brittany. I'll like my wife.
Oh, really?
I'll actually be like, this is what I'm trying to do. Like, obviously I fucked it up here and there, but like, this is all I'm trying to do. And that helps big time, dude. And also the same way of being like, what are you trying to do? Because once people get, then people are like, then they have to come up with the fact that like, well, here's what I'm trying to do. Because if you don't have a thing you're trying to do, you're merely just, you're like a bird in nature. You're just kind of like looking around. What are we doing? You're just reacting to shit. And it's like, I don't know. I don't think that's a very fulfilling way to be,
No, I completely agree. I think we're all novices at communication. And especially when things get heated, you go through these dips of like, okay, this person just made fun of me, so I want to hurt them back.
Yeah.
Well, that takes the intention off. And that is very difficult. So I think that's awesome that you did it, Brittany, of trying to, in the beginning, saying something along the lines of like, hey, by the way, I suck at communication, but here's what I'm trying to accomplish. So we're going to take a super zigzaggy pattern to get there. But I promise you, my intention is not to hurt you. It is to actually come to a great outcome for the both of us. But it's not going to seem like that in the middle. It's going to be like a car crash in the middle. But dude, it helps a lot.
It is. And it's one of those things too, like, especially like in any relationship, but I can think about like, my marriage. It's like, if we start getting angry, there comes a point in a argument where like, you're not even arguing about the thing anymore. This is just two people's anger battling each other. Do you remember watch the Power Rangers when they summon when the white or the Green Ranger plays his flute and like the big dinosaur comes out of the water? That's the way I look at anger, when like all of a sudden now this other entity has come, and like all of my life's frustrations now have entered this whole thing. We should be talking about one thing, but now all of our frustrations in life total are now battling each other because now we attacked each other. Now we've done this, and now I'm pissed off about something else, and I'm like, well, fuck this. I'm gonna bring this in here too. So it's like that is what happens, man. It's like, are you dealing with an actual issue, or is this just something that is this like a catharsis now you're taking advantage of, and just like you've so spun out of control that you're just like you're just fighting anger. You're just being angry, and you're multiplying the problem. Just because in the short term it feels awesome to be like, oh yeah, feels phenomenal, and then afterwards,
that
didn't really work. It didn't do anything.
Have you ever had a writing fight?
Yeah, big time.
Well, like
they help. If I that's what I do too. A lot of times I will, if it's not going, I just remove myself, and then I'll just start I'll just write, like, I'll be like, here's exactly how I feel. I couldn't communicate this in person because I kept freaking out and getting like spazzing. This is exactly how I feel, and it's like, here's that information. Now that you're not going to like cut me off halfway and like another argument. This is the thing I'm trying to communicate and I can't do it. Dude, it works so well.
Dude, I wish more people would do that. It almost feels like a mime fight or something. It seems like very weird, just like two mimes, like not being able to use your words. You just have to like express it in a different modality. But writing fights, I honestly think, I feel like anytime your heart rate reaches above a certain heart rate, right? I don't know what, like 120 or something. Like, maybe that's, I'm not really good with heart rates, but
say like 90 would be a pretty high. 90 to 100 means you're like,
okay.
you're ripping.
Yeah, there actually is a standard. If you read, I think you and I both read 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. They actually have a metric in there for heart rate. Like they would measure couples' heart rates, and once it got above a certain level, they found it statistically better to stop and walk away.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you convert which brain you're starting to use. You're starting to use your primitive limbic system part of your brain rather than your prefrontal cortex, because it takes, just by definition, it stops the blood flow there.
That's why they think like the part of the road rage phenomenon, they think it stems from the fact that you're operating on, you know, your limbic system, where it's like you're driving, you're moving fast, you're doing something that's kind of inherently dangerous. And when someone does something that bothers you, you're just like, because you're in that kind of mode of like, what are you doing, dude? This is dangerous. And it's weird because you also daydream during that. But if someone cuts in front of you, the reaction is like full 10 out of 10 spaz. Usually I've gotten good at just like, you know, letting stuff like that live. But yeah, man, I think that's where a lot of like, I mean, yeah, you want to talk, I mean, this is something I always think about too. When people talk about like, you know, I personally have like lofty goals for how people should treat each other, you know, including myself. But then it's like, you know, one of the reality checks is like, just pull up to a 4-way stop sign and you'll see humanity at its like, you know, basic level of like some guy pulling in and being like, what the fuck? What? It's like, everyone's like, it's my turn at once. And then you have to negotiate that whole situation. It's like, that just pops up over and over again. All the time.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. What was I gonna say? Oh, the writing fight. I think that is so valuable, and as weird as it sounds, if you are in an argument, like I've been in many arguments in my life, and where I said, hey, look, I know this sounds weird, but you go and write a letter to me. I will write a letter to you about what the points are. It forces, just like Jordan Peterson says, writing is thinking. It forces you to articulate incomplete and put it in complete sentences, right? Forces you to articulate. And man, there has never been a letter that I've written in terms of an argument where I didn't have massive holes in my logic, right? And I consider myself to be a very rational, logical person, but when you write it out, man, because when it's a verbal altercation, it's just like, no, you did this and you did this and this is what happened. And first of all, the biggest thing is, especially if it's like a longer argument where it's stemmed over the course of months, right? I think anytime you've been in relationships, like those things happen, right? You never fully complete the debate. And it's always kind of left in like you couldn't finish it because you got too angry or got too distracted or whatever. And then it comes up a few months later. So it was never fully solved. So I think writing, number one, it does that. It's like, okay, what are all of the factors in here? And I find that the longer an argument goes on, like if it goes over the course of several months or years or whatever, that facts start to be wrong, right? It's like, no, we already agreed on this last month and now you're changing it. And the way humans can be very sneaky, like, so we start to exaggerate certain things. It's like, well, you always do this. It's like, I don't always do that. Or I'll say that you always this, like, you don't always do that, but forcing yourself to like write it out, man. Oh my gosh. And then what I also found is in that letter, as clinical as this sounds, writing out my points and saying, here are the 5 things that I think are contributing to the situation. Here are my feelings. But then for these sticking points, I've made a table. And as crazy as it sounds, I've made a table. It's like, okay, here are the things that we cannot agree on right now. And so that's the left side of the table, right? It's a 4-column table. Left side of the very most left is the things we can't agree on. Here's the 5 things. And then in the next column, I put, let's just say if it's an intimate relationship, you know, for my girlfriend, I put her opinions down. Here's a sticking point. Here's how you feel about it. Am I saying that the right way? And then in the 3rd column, it's my opinion on it. And then the 4th column, it's, okay, what do we agree is the reality of this situation? Yeah. You know, that sort of a thing. So for instance, right, like, you know, one issue I had was, what was it? Going to the gym too much, right? Like, here's the sticking point, like, is gym time, right? And, you know, hey, my girlfriend's opinion, here's what your take on that is. And here's why I think why, but here's what my reality is. Here's your reality. Here's my reality. Okay. Knowing now, and she does not like this process, but it is a very productive process.
It is, man. It fucking is, you know?
Dude, it forces you to articulate and clarify your thoughts.
Dude, otherwise, this is what I was thinking about is like, I mean, this is like, if you're just handling this just like, without any sort of help or any sort of other like logic or external tools, we had couples counseling and like the lady would be like, call a pause. And I'm like, call a fucking pause. It works so well. Just like pause. And every time she pauses me, I mutter, I walk away. I'm like, fucking pause me. 10 minutes later, my heart rate settles. I'm like, all right, sorry.
Yeah.
What were we talking about? So yeah, you need to have a system. The idea that you can just kind of freewheel this thing and like, anything that's not freewheeling and is somehow inauthentic on some level, I think it's an error in human thinking. I think it's just, I used to think that way. And it's just, then I looked at my results and I'm like, my relationship results are pretty abysmal. So clearly I could use some help, so it's like, yeah, man, there's one tactic, like, otherwise it devolves into like this is a scenario that used to pop up for me. Someone like say like, someone I was talking to will like complain, like, you do this thing, or this is something you do. And I'd be like, give me an example. When did I actually do that? And they're like, I can't think of one right now. And I'm like, I won, but you didn't win. They're still mad. And they're like, fuck you for that too. Right. So I was like, yeah, it just turns into this, like, this battle of two people who are both 100% convinced they're right. And then you're just like convincing yourself you're right more at each other. And it just doesn't do anything unless you can say, this is what I think you're saying. This is what I'm saying. Something out of this has to emerge. We both agree on. That's the only way this thing can move forward.
Yeah, if you play the game to quote win, you might win because you can intimidate the other party. You can be quote smarter in the moment than the other party, whatever. But if you don't clarify something and come to a mutually agreed upon foundation to then move forward from, you're just going to encounter the problem in the future.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to be worse because then it's tacked on to, we have this problem and now we still have this problem. And then that still have this problem evolves to, we always have this problem. And then it's a whole nother monster. It's a go, you haven't changed this. It's like, but then the other side, it's like, no, you haven't changed this. It's like, no, man, stop, like nip it in the bud when you have time. And it's one of those things is, yes, it is more tedious to go through that. Again, getting back to leadership, it's like you have to take the leadership role to accomplish this. It's going to take more time, but it's that whole quote of like, if you don't have time to do it right, when are you going to have time to do it over? Right. And then you could have pretty devastating results if you don't do it correctly. And I agree with Matt. You have to have tools. At some point, I should probably share that table with somebody if with our audience if they want to use it. But it is a game changer for me. And then similarly, what's been a game changer for me, and Matt, you and I have talked about this in the past, is I've got an anger calibration table. It's actually, I've now evolved it to an emotional calibration table. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of things happen, like you were saying, when you're driving, all of a sudden somebody cuts you off and you get a level 10 angry. And you gave the listeners a while back a methodology at which to kind of think through things. For me, it's a calibration table. So it's like, where are my emotions on a scale of 0 to 10? Let's just say for anger, you can take any emotions. Okay, mm-hmm. Let's say anger. Anger it lives on a spectrum. 0 is I should be indifferent on this. Like, if somebody spills a glass of milk, like the whole spilt milk thing, like that should yield little to no response. That is something that won't move the needle in my life one way or another. But then it can go all the way up to a level 10, right? Like spouse cheats on you or something like that, like something and then there's shades of gray in between. But I have found that really identifying those things, and then when I get super angry, looking at that table and saying, what is this? And Matt, you actually helped me refine this table, because I think at one point you gave the filter of like, is this going to physically hurt me or something like that, right? There are forks in the road that you should go through that help you calibrate those things. So and then when I look at that table, it's like, okay, where does this land on the scale of 0 to 10 of and I have examples in there. Like actually one of them is literally got cut off on the road. Mm-hmm. Right. Like quite literally. So I look at that. It's like, okay, this is the equivalent of that. And okay, what should my emotional response be? Like, because I was clear headed when I wrote the table. Yeah. Right. So chances are that's how I should respond. And if I'm exaggerating the response, if I'm overreacting, dude, that table helps me so much, because like, hey, dummy, your limbic system is just taking over right now, and you're just overreacting because you're emotional. And dude, it's as simple or as nerdy as that sounds, dude, it helps me every time.
Yeah, man. Just realizing there's a part of you that can actually experience what you're going through and really analyze that, rather than, that's the whole idea of cognitive fusion, of being like, I got cut off, I'm angry, they're wrong. It's like, yeah, it's shitty to cut somebody off, but you do have a choice to how you respond to it. And it's like the automatic decision is just like, blah, and freaking out. But it's like, it's just not good for you, man. Or like, if you have kids in the back seat, or if you're with somebody and like you just like go full on like punching your steering wheel spaz out, probably not going to bode well for you. You know what I mean? Unless they're like,
Right.
oh man, that's so cool. Like I usually that's not the case. People are like, dude, what are you doing? You're like, well, I got cut off. And they're like, yeah, I mean,
Yep.
it sucks, but yeah, no, I completely agree. And this is important for people to start learning how to, engage with themselves and not, because that can color a person's entire life. That like kind of license to just like freak out based on how they're feeling and be totally vindicated, totally validated. And that's how the majority of people are operating. And it's
Yep.
just, like you were saying, it's like, no, this isn't the best way. I was clear-minded when I came up with this way to react to this stuff. Now I'm not clear-minded. So do I have some anchor to like my clear and kind of, more like present state rather than just this like snowball of like, why did they do this? And just kind of flipping from one thing to another without being
Yeah.
like, again, you do have a responsibility in that situation not to freak out. That person shouldn't cut you off. You shouldn't spaz. It's like, so I think that's awesome. I think it's a great thing.
Well, I also think one thing to point out with you and your situation, because this is an exercise in leadership and you're going through like a little mini crisis right now with your business. I also think it's important for the listeners to know that you've done an outstanding job of building a solid foundation around you holistically in your life, right? So for instance, like, you don't cheat on your wife, right? You don't have credit card debt. You didn't buy a car that you can't afford. Like all of these other areas that create extreme chaos and a lack of a foundation to then move from is good, right? Like you're solid. So that way, when you have this little mini fire over here, the rest of your world is not burning down. So you can focus your full energy on solving this problem rather than trying to solve this problem and say, oh shit, well now this is collapsing and this is collapsing over here. And
Yeah.
I've got 50,000 of credit card debt and I've got debt collectors calling me and my wife's wondering why I didn't, come home, until late last, like all of this other
Yeah.
stuff that it's like, hell man, like your brain, I think Jordan Peterson explained it as like, I think your hippocampus, I think that's the part of the brain he was talking about, basically has like tree roots going down and only like small little veins going up, meaning that like once you activate that thing, when you activate this primitive part of your nervous system, your brain, good luck. It's like very similar to if you turn up the heat in a room to 110 degrees, you can't concentrate on anything else. If you're trying to read a book, you're not gonna be able to read a book. So how many people out there, including we've all been through it, right? You've turned up the heat in so many areas of life where it just turns into fire and chaos. How can you approach a problem with a rational, clear mind and your ability to solve it if you've got everything else around you is just deteriorating? And that's why I think the whole making your bed thing is really helpful. Like bring order to a lot of the things, all of the things that order can be brought to.
Yeah, no, I do that. The whole thing too of the tree roots going down and little like tiny veins coming up is probably the best because it's like the reaction's instantaneous. It's just like like almost like like an electrical shock, and then you have
Yep.
to slow. The ability to talk yourself out of that is like a very slow and very concentrated thing, and then like boom, you get another shock. Boom, you get another. They'll keep coming and coming. So yeah, man. That is the goal, and that's almost that's the. Let's say, when people say someone's sitting there at a job, I always go back to this, sitting there and you're like, I should be doing this. I shouldn't just be doing this. It's like, yeah, I think people have tons of potential they don't tap into, but realize this is what comes with it. It's not a guy popping in, putting his feet up and being like, everyone's doing my bidding. Now I'm going to smoke a cigar. It's like, no,
Yep.
it's just more stress, more frustration. So like, yeah, you need to build these skills. Like the chances of, and I would include myself in this, of not being able to function at an entry level and thinking you're just going to jump ahead like without the skills learned at that to operate at that level to the top and operate well, it's not going to happen, dude. I've learned
Nope.
this full stop myself. It's like you should get out of that and you should move to where like you feel comfortable, but like it is kind of crazy to think like I'm going to skip step 1, hit step 10 and just be like, I did it, everything's cool. It's like, no, man, there are things you pick up along the way, and I've
Yep.
for sure learned that the hard way, big time.
Yeah. Oh, so have I.
Yeah, man. So, but
Charlie Munger said the best way of life to get ahead is to deserve it. And I mean,
yeah.
that's how you got to go through life, man.
Yeah. And even telling yourself you deserve it. So many people who are just like, oh, I can't do that. And it's just like, okay, yeah, sure. If you say that, for sure you won't. Like you 100% won't. You just won't. Nobody's gonna
So
stop and like like now like the hero fantasy of like Will Smith just a beat cop and the FBI has been secretly watching. Not even the FBI, alien police have been watching him and like we think you have what it takes. It doesn't fucking happen.
nope.
Nobody's doing.
Nope.
Nobody's
Definitely
like,
doesn't
oh, let me
happen.
just bring this person. Doesn't happen. Does not happen. You know, that's a fantasy, dude, of like someone being like, I think you have what it takes. It's like, finally someone recognizes me and they're just going to make this happen for me. It's like, I always go back to that. Them going to Will Smith, like, we've seen what you're doing here. Come to this.
What movie are you
I
referencing?
think it's Men in Black.
Oh, nice.
When
Nice.
he was like chasing a guy down, he solves a crime, and these people, I think like Tommy Davis, whatever his name is, comes up and is like, I like what you have.
Oh, sort of like the chosen one sort of
exactly, yeah.
narrative.
Yeah, like, we're gonna show you aliens now. You're like, oh, sweet.
Yeah, no, man, I agree. You got to build the muscle, and the muscle only comes from repetitions.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to say, in the spirit of sharing our wins, I want to share a win for you. So we start this last podcast, and I think as guys on this team, especially, we have to share wins because that's what we're in the game for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we very rarely acknowledge each other for those wins. So I want to give you a win right now. And then I want to know your wins for the last week, or at least whatever the top wins for the last week. I think it's a huge win, man, that you're going through this crisis. And just what I said a few minutes ago, that you have so much of a foundation around you that it will allow you to focus your mental faculties and skill sets on solving that crisis. And that is kind of an invisible win, but that's a decade's worth of work, right, and commitment, and not being a Peter Pan when it comes to relationships, not being a dunce when it comes to your money, like saving up, like all those things, and then not buying stuff, living below your means, like all of those things, man, right now gives you the ability to focus on this and handle it like a real leader.
Oh yeah, dude, I appreciate that. I mean,
yeah, man,
tit for tat wins, but I do think, you've done that with like a 10-year. I could say the same thing about you, just with a 10-year head start, where it's like,
thanks, bud, appreciate it.
Where it's like, I think about that all the time. I'm like, dude, it's pretty awesome to see, like, you've actually done the right stuff for a very long time, and it's pretty tight to see.
All right, thanks, man. So with that being said, what are a few other wins you had for this last week? And by the way, the listeners, this makes Matt very uncomfortable because he's like super humble and doesn't like to talk about stuff. So we're forcing each other to say, hey, man, as a team, and for the listeners, and by the way, listeners, start to form your own men's teams here and meet with guys consistently, at least once a week, and acknowledge your wins and also acknowledge what your challenges are. So Matt, what are your wins, brother?
So, yeah, and I agree with all that stuff you just said. I think the internet could be a better place, and I do feel badly, again, that I have an idealized version of the internet, what it could be to help people, and try to like pull it out of that cesspool of like attacking people. And, I fell into that this week. I'm kind of pissed, but my win. So this week so far, it's funny actually. So I've been doing awesome on so this is my daily habits scorecard. It's SMEVLS. It's sun, meditating, exercise, veggies twice a day, an act of love, just to make sure like I always check do something to make sure everything's cool in the house, and then the sleep.
Yep.
So, but my win, I had, signed up for yoga. I started doing yoga. I broke my running record again this week. I settled settled a whole other romantic flare up that had, I had a little argument this week as well with my romantic life. So that kind of settled. And I'm like, one of my main win is actually that I'm using this thing, and I'm going to actually complete. I'm in a part right now where I'm like, I'm going to complete the things that I said I was going to complete, in terms of like, exercising, everything else, and all I have to do is do a little more work stuff, and I will have completed my actual thing that I set out to do this week. So that's the meta win. That's the big one.
Hell yeah, man. Nice stuff, dude. That's especially like the physical activity and the yoga and the scorecard, man. That is so important. Just keeps you grounded. Yeah, no, absolutely. At some point we'll have to make one for the listeners and share it with everybody. So for me, honestly, one of the biggest win that I had this past week was, I love doing this stuff, and I love working with guys and so on. And obviously what I do for full time is manage money. I manage investments, and I just believe in using your skill sets to help as many people as possible. So I got this referral. It was this younger guy and single dad, in a lot of debt, relative to his income and so on. And he's had this debt for 3 years, and it was a medical debt, and he was basically ducking it for years. Right. He got a new truck. I did all this thing. And he's telling me, he's like, well, my father-in-law is telling me like, I basically don't have to pay this thing. Right. And we were talking, he wanted me to teach him about investing. And I said, dude, like, can I just talk to you like a brother, like a guy to a guy? I said, look, like, man the fuck up and pay your responsibilities. Right. And I never met this guy, and we only were on the phone. I said, look, I've never met you, but I know the person you came in from was another good friend of mine. So I'm just going to talk to you like you're a good buddy. It's like, you have a daughter. He's a single dad raising a daughter. And I'm telling him, I'm like, dude, like, let's say you do it. And yes, for medical bills, 9 times out of 10, you can skirt them, right? Like, but I said, look, like what was the condition? He told me it was like, it was a surgery because he got in a car accident. I said, look, if that doctor said to you, hey man, like I can fix your leg. If I don't fix it, it's going to fall off. Right. Or you can pay me and I can fix it and you're going to have a great life. Right. But you got to make the decision now. Like I told him, you would for sure say, I'll pay you. Right. You would figure it out. But now since the transaction's over, this is arguably one of the most valuable transactions you've ever participated in. It saved your fucking leg.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There's no ambiguity. But now because you feel like you can kind of beat the system, I said, dude, how do you think you're building yourself in your own head? Right. And if you think for 1 second your daughter is not going to read that in you, right, that you can beat the system, like that is just going to show itself over and over and over again in your leadership to your daughter. And dude, that hit him. Like he was actually kind of pissed that I was talking about that because he just wanted some like stock market advice. I said, dude, what I would tell you, dude, is get it done. Like hand her shit. I don't care if it takes you years. And then we can talk about investing. And dude, the best win that I've had this week and for a while was he then called me last weekend and sent me a text and said, dude, my debt's gone. He paid his debt off in 3 weeks, right? I had this conversation in 3 weeks when he's been skirting it for 3 years. And dude, he called me almost, he said, man, I can't tell you how much I thank you so much. And then he sent a text to my buddy who referred him, who then sent me the text showing. He's like, dude, he's like, thanks so much for introducing me to that guy, Wes, because I initially was kind of pissed off at him because he gave me homework and he kind of had some tough love comments for me. He's like, but dude, it was a game changer. And I'm not bragging. I'm saying that was when I got that text like that and I had that conversation with him, man, that was a huge win. And then in addition to that, I think as men, we should really support each other. Like just how I bought that book for you and sent it over. It's like, man, as guys, we need to really harvest our relationships. So I got on the phone with him and said, hey man, like, I know this is a little small token, a little trophy for you, but I sent him $50 via Venmo. And I said, take your daughter out to lunch, and realize like, this is the first lunch you have that's debt free, right? You don't have it hanging over your head. He's like, dude, he's like, I never thought it would have felt like that. He's like, you feel like a new person when you don't have these creditors calling you, these obligations that say you need to pay us back. It's like he handled his shit, man. So like I had a lot more wins through the week, but that was the biggest one. Made me feel real good.
Isn't that crazy how that will make you feel better than some things that should, in reality make you feel awesome? Dude, that's awesome, man. That's fucking awesome.
Oh yeah, man. Well, I'll have to have him on the show at some point because you can tell he's on the team.
Yeah.
He's like now corrected his life just enough where he's like, I'm going to play this game right. And I'm going to be the type of person that I wish my son would be or my daughter would be, whatever the case is. So we have to live that stuff. And then the other big win that I want to say, and a big thank you to you, Matt, for coming to my mom's birthday. So my mom's birthday was this past weekend. I've never missed her birthday ever. And now I live out in California and she lives in Philadelphia. And like, you get all those stories in your head. It's like, man, but I'm tired and, I need to work. And it's like, or I could just hop on the red-eye flight on Friday night, get into Philadelphia Friday morning, and then leave on Sunday morning and get it done, right? And just don't fucking complain about it. Because you know what? When Ben Franklin was living and he used to travel to destinations, especially like, overseas, it used to take him 3 weeks by boat, and the probability of death was like 20%. It's like, or, now would I take that, or would I take, I can get back for my mom's birthday and like have peanuts on the way in the airplane and like take a little nap and have a whole row to myself in the airplane. It's like, it's easy, man. So true. I think a win was getting home for my mom's birthday, and we had, 15 people over her house, and she was super pumped. So that for me is really saying, triple down on the relationships that are worth it to you and put a lot of effort into those relationships. And dude, it's super rewarding. Yeah. So that's another win.
That's awesome. And dude, real quick too, this is what I'm learning too, because I always would put work in front of everything. I'm like, oh, you don't have to work. When you put the other stuff first, and then you get you buy yourself the free, peaceful time to work. It's like your mind's moving better. It's just like you just function better.
Yep.
So it's like, I think that's awesome, man.
Well, the concept of investing to me, I guess that's why it's my career, but also like just in every other area, like voluntarily invest in things so you can build up that bank account or build up that investment account, because inevitably you're going to have to at some point you're going to have to borrow from it, or like you're going to have to take time away from that. And then go do work, right? So, but if you've already invested in your marriage or in your friendships and so on, then you're exactly what you said. You buy the time that you can focus on something, and somebody is not saying, well, Matt owes me something, or like, or your wife is saying, well, you haven't spent time with me. It's like you've already you front loaded that investment. So then you buy yourself clarity and autonomy when you want it.
Yeah, man. Hell yeah. That's awesome.
Awesome. What's one takeaway for me this time was when you actually said is little, there's a small little part of this, but you said where you and Shane, to solve this problem, you're going to have a fun little like judge and jury thing for your crisis. You're going to bring your listeners on, let them on one at a time, and you're going to be, I guess the defense, and the others are going to be the prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a brilliant way of bringing a certain level of lightheartedness to a difficult situation. And I think, I need to take a bit of that. It's like, if you have a difficult situation, how can you bring humor into it to help solve it?
Oh yeah, dude. No, I mean, that's, luckily it is a comedy podcast. So, it does, you want to keep everything kind of fun, but yeah, there is real life fuel for that thing that, again, I talked to a couple people, and including myself, and it was like, dude, I don't feel good at all about this. And the guy, like, who had like the stuff with our content on it, he's like, I don't feel good either, man. I never meant to do anything to piss you guys off. And it's like, yeah, you know what, dude, this was just a bad mistake. My bad. So we're cool and all, but I have to, like, I have this innate sense that things aren't right, and it's hard, especially when you're doing like a creative endeavor. It's hard to think about novel and fun things when you're saying like you're running on that limbic system partly.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, you have to just address it, man. My original thinking was like, fuck that shit. I don't care anymore about that stuff. But then, then like I feel kind of weird. I'm like, shit, I kind of do. Fuck. So
yeah, that's the stereotypical, macho to sort of way of handling it. No, I mean, the way I think you're handling it perfectly, man.
Yeah. Well, this is my takeaway, honestly, is that, this kind of ties into this. But it's like, to think that you can single-handedly navigate these life issues that are typically associated with blind spots in your personality / ego or whatever, it's crazy. You do need a squad of people that you can kind of like,
for sure,
assess situations through, get honest feedback, receive honest feedback. Because sometimes that's hard even for me. I'm a pretty open-minded dude, but sometimes it's like there's certain nerves of feedback that I get, and I'm like, no. And it's not like I can't handle it, but I'm just not doing a good enough job of articulating my position and where I'm coming from. If that's not getting, So yeah, so that's something that is required, and I'm learning more and more. Like, you do need to have these open lines of communication. Otherwise, it's like you're left just, stranded by yourself on some level.
Yep, we all need teams, brother, for sure.
Oh yeah.
All right, man. Great session, dude. Until next week.
Definitely, man.